The rehabilitation station smelled like antiseptic and fear. Dr. Owen Hayes carried his medical kit through the curved hallways, nodding to the various alien staff members who rushed past him. He had been working here for 3 months now, treating injured creatures from across the galaxy. Most days were routine. Broken wings, infected wounds, the occasional poisoning from eating the wrong plant. Today felt different, though. The entire facility buzzed with nervous energy. A tall bird-like creature named Quillen intercepted him near the medical bay. Her feathers were ruffled, a sign of distress in her species. "Dr. Hayes, thank goodness you are here. We have a situation." Owen followed her into the bay, where a massive dragon lay motionless on the largest treatment platform. Her scales were a deep emerald color, dulled by death. Several staff members stood around her body, speaking in hushed tones. But what caught Owen's attention was the small chirping sound coming from a heated box near the corner. "The mother died 2 hours ago," Quillen explained, her voice tight. "Complications from a birth. The hatchling is healthy, but we have a problem." Owen walked over to the box and looked inside. A tiny dragon, no bigger than a house cat, huddled in the corner. Its bronze-red scales caught the light as it shivered. One wing was tucked against its body normally, but the other bent at an odd angle. The hatchling looked up at him with golden eyes and made a soft, questioning sound. "What kind of problem?" Owen asked, though he suspected he already knew that Quillen's feathers flattened against her head. "No clan will take it. We contacted 7 different dragon families. They all refused. The hatchling is too small, and that wing is malformed. They say we'll never fly properly, never hunt, never contribute to the clan. They call it defective." Owen reached into the box slowly. The hatchling flinched but did not pull away. He gently examined the twisted wing, feeling along the delicate bones. "This can be corrected with daily manipulation and exercises. The bone is not broken, just positioned wrong. Give it a few months of proper care, and this wing will be fine." "That does not matter to them," another voice said. Owen turned to see a reptilian medic named Sark standing behind him. Dragon culture values strength and perfection. A hatchling like this is considered a burden. Even if the wing heals, the fact that it was born this way marks it as weak. The hatchling chirped again, louder this time. It sounded like a question, like it was asking what would happen next. Owen felt something twist in his chest. He had heard that sound before, in the voices of dying animals back on Earth, in creatures that knew they were running out of time. "So what happens now?" he asked, though part of him did not want to hear the answer. Quillen looked away. "Station policy is clear. If a creature cannot be released back into the wild and cannot be adopted, we must euthanize it. We cannot keep every unwanted animal here. We do not have the resources or the space. You're going to kill it because no one wants it." Owen heard his voice rise. Several staff members looked over at him. "We have no choice," Quillen said quietly. "I have already contacted the council. They approve the procedure. It will be done humanely, I promise you that." Owen looked down at the hatchling again. It had stopped chirping and was staring at him with those golden eyes. Something in that gaze reminded him of why he became a veterinarian in the first place. Back on Earth, he had grown up on a farm where his father regularly culled the weak animals. Owen had argued against it every time, insisting that with proper care, most of them would survive and thrive. His father had called him too soft, too sentimental, said he would never make it in the real world with that attitude. Maybe his father had been right. Maybe Owen was too soft. But standing here, looking at this tiny creature that had done nothing wrong except be born with a twisted wing, he found that he did not care. "I will take them," he said. The room went quiet. Quillen stared at him. "Excuse me. I will adopt the hatchling. I will take responsibility for its care." Owen picked up the small dragon carefully, supporting its body with both hands. The hatchling made a surprise sound but then settled against his chest, its scales warm against his shirt. "Dr. Hayes, that is not possible," Quillen said, her voice strained. "Dragon hatchlings require constant care for the first year. They need to bond with their caretaker. The process is extremely difficult even for other dragons. For a human, it is impossible. No human has ever successfully raised a dragon from birth. Then I will be the first. Sark stepped forward. The bonding process is not just emotional. It is biological. Dragon hatchlings imprint on the scent, the sound, the feel of their caretaker. They need specific nutrients, specific temperatures, specific social cues. You cannot provide what it needs. Owen looked down at the hatchling in his arms. It had stopped shivering. Its eyes were half closed, and it made a soft, rumbling sound that might have been contentment. I'm a veterinarian. I have studied hundreds of species. I can learn what it needs. I can adapt. This is against regulations. Quillen protested. Humans are not approved to adopt Class 5 predator species. The paperwork alone will take months. The Council will never allow it. According to you, the Council already approved this hatchling's death, Owen said flatly. So either I take it, or you kill it. Those are the only two options right now. I am choosing to take it. Quillen opened her beak, closed it, then opened it again. Finally, she sighed, a sound like wind through canyon walls. Very well. But Dr. Hayes, understand that you are taking on an enormous responsibility. If this fails, if the hatchling dies or becomes dangerous, it will be on your hands. Owen nodded. The hatchling yawned, showing tiny sharp teeth, then tucked its head under his chin. I understand. As he walked out of the medical bay with the hatchling cradled against his chest, he heard Sark mutter to Quillen, "This is how humans are. They see a lost cause and decide it is worth saving anyway. It is foolish." Quillen's response was softer. Perhaps. Or perhaps that is why they are called Deathworlders. They simply do not know when to quit. Owen's quarters were not designed for raising a dragon. The small room had a bed, a desk, a tiny bathroom, and a storage locker. He cleared out the bottom of his locker and lined it with heated blankets, creating a nest of sorts. The hatchling watched him work with curious eyes, chirping occasionally from where it sat on his bed. "There we go," Owen said, placing the nest on the floor near his bed. "That should keep you warm enough." The hatchling looked at the nest, looked at Owen, then climbed off the bed and walked directly to his foot. It sat down on his shoe and looked up at him expectantly. Owen laughed despite his exhaustion. "All right, I get it. You want to be close." He picked up the hatchling and sat on the floor with his back against the bed. The small dragon immediately climbed onto his lap and curled into a ball. Within seconds, it was asleep. That first night passed slowly. Owen dozed off several times, but kept waking when the hatchling shifted or made sounds. Around midnight, it started crying, a high-pitched wail that cut through the quiet. Owen tried everything. He checked its temperature. He looked for injuries. He offered it water. Nothing worked. Finally, desperate, he opened the emergency rations he had brought from Earth. He had some dried meat meant for long space voyages. He broke off a tiny piece and held it near the hatchling's mouth. It sniffed, turned away, and cried louder. Owen felt panic rising in his chest. What if Quillen and Sark were right? What if he could not do this? He thought back to his research on dragons. They were social creatures. Young dragons learned by watching their parents. They ate what their parents ate, slept when their parents slept, flew when their parents flew. He did not have a parent dragon to show this hatchling what to do. But he had himself. Owen took a piece of the dried meat and ate it himself, making exaggerated chewing motions. The hatchling stopped crying and watched him. He took another piece, placed it in his palm, and held it near the hatchling's mouth while humming softly. His mother used to hum when she fed the baby animals on their farm. It was just a simple tune, nothing special. The hatchling tilted its head, sniffed the meat, and took a tiny bite. Then another. Then it ate the entire piece. Owen felt relief wash over him. He fed the hatchling several more pieces, humming the whole time, until it seemed satisfied. Then the small dragon climbed back onto his chest and fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat. The next 2 weeks followed a similar pattern. Owen learned that the hatchling, which he started calling Ruby because of her bronze-red scales, would only eat if he ate first. She would only sleep if she could hear his breathing. She would only calm down if he hummed or talked to her. It was exhausting and demanding and completely unlike anything he had experienced before, but it worked. Ruby grew stronger each day. Her scales brightened. Her movements became more confident. and that twisted wing slowly began to straighten as Owen gently manipulated it each morning, working the muscles and bones back in a proper alignment. The station staff checked on them regularly, always seeming surprised to find Ruby alive and healthy. Quillen visited on the 10th day and found Owen at his desk, typing up patient reports while Ruby slept in a sling tied around his chest. "You look terrible," Quillen observed. Owen rubbed his eyes. "I have not slept more than 2 hours at a time in over a week. But Ruby is doing well. Watch this." He stood up slowly, careful not to wake the sleeping hatchling. He walked around the room, sat down, stood up again. Ruby slept through all of it. "She trusts me now. She feels safe." Quillen's feathers rippled in what might have been approval. "I admit, I did not think you would make it this far. But Dr. Hayes, you must understand something. The difficult part is not keeping a hatchling alive. The difficult part is what comes next. Ruby will grow. She will become stronger, more independent, more aware of what she is. Eventually, she will realize that you're not a dragon, that you cannot teach her to fly, to hunt, to be what she is meant to be. What will you do then?" Owen looked down at Ruby, at her peaceful, sleeping face. "I will figure it out. I always do." But Quillen's words stayed with him. That night, after Ruby ate and settled down, Owen pulled out his tablet and started researching. He found texts on dragon behavior from 12 different species. He watched videos of dragon parents teaching their young to fly. He read medical journals about dragon nutrition and growth patterns. He compiled notes, cross-referenced data, and built a plan. The station had a small gym that was rarely used during night shifts. Owen started taking Ruby there after midnight. He would gently extend her wings, now both straightening out properly, and help her practice the motions of flying while he held her safely above the padded floor. At first, she seemed confused, but after a few nights, she started to understand. She would flap her wings in rhythm, building muscle, learning balance. On the 14th day, Ruby chirped out a sound that almost formed a word. It sounded like Owen, his name, or close enough to it. He nearly dropped his coffee. "Did you just say my name?" he asked her. Ruby looked at him, tilted her head, and repeated it. "Owen." He picked her up, and she wrapped her tail around his arm, something she did when she felt happy. As they stood there in his quarters, Owen realized that he was not teaching Ruby to be a dragon. He was teaching her to be Ruby, and maybe that was enough. The next morning, Quillen came to his quarters with bad news written all over her face. "Dr. Hayes, I have received an order from station administration. They are concerned about legal complications with your adoption of Ruby. They want you to leave the station within 3 days." I tried to argue, but they will not budge. Owen looked at Ruby, who was practicing her wing stretches on his bed. "Where will we go?" Quillen handed him a data chip. "I took the liberty of finding you a position. There is a frontier colony that needs a veterinarian. They are desperate enough that they will not ask questions about Ruby. It is rough, dangerous, and far from any major civilization. But it is a chance." Owen took the chip. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. You may regret this before it is over." But as Owen packed his belongings and prepared for departure, with Ruby watching curiously from her sling, he did not feel regret. He felt something else entirely. He felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The colony looked like it had been built by people who expected to leave within a year. Prefabricated buildings clustered around a central square, their gray walls showing signs of harsh weather and poor maintenance. Mining equipment sat idle near the edge of the settlement, covered in red dust from the planet's iron-rich soil. Owen counted maybe 200 people as a shuttle touched down on the landing pad that a stocky woman with gray hair and tired eyes met him at the ramp. She wore work clothes that had seen better days and carried a datapad like a weapon. "Dr. Hayes, I'm Dorothy Grant, Colony Administrator. Welcome to Theta 7. Thank you for having us," Owen said, adjusting the carrier on his back where Ruby rode. The hatchling had grown significantly during their 2-week journey. She was now the size of a medium dog, and her wings folded neatly against her sides. Dorothy's eyes fixed on Ruby. "That is the dragon. This is Ruby, yes." The file said she was small. Dorothy's voice was flat, giving nothing away. "She is still young. She will grow more." Dorothy studied them both for a long moment, then nodded once. Your clinic is Building 7, west side of the square. It used to be a storage facility, so you will need to clean it out. We have basic medical supplies, but anything specialized will take weeks to arrive. Do not expect much help from the colonists. They are scared. Owen followed Dorothy through the settlement. People stopped to stare as they passed. A few children pointed and whispered. One woman pulled her child behind her and hurried away. Ruby made a low sound in her throat. Not quite a growl, but close. They will get used to you, Dorothy said, though she did not sound convinced. We have bigger problems than a dragon. The main water recycler is failing. The Easter mine shaft has stability issues, and half our crop yield was destroyed by a fungal infection last month. If you can keep our people and animals healthy, nobody will care what you keep as a pet. The clinic was worse than Owen expected. Boxes of outdated equipment filled one corner. The walls needed cleaning. The environmental controls barely worked. But it had space, lots of it, and that was what Ruby needed most. Owen set down his bags and let Ruby out of her carrier. She immediately started exploring, sniffing everything, her claws clicking on the metal floor. Over the next 3 months, Owen fell into a routine. He spent his mornings treating colonists and their animals. Broken bones from mining accidents. Infected wounds from careless tool use. Livestock with various ailments. The work was endless and exhausting, but straightforward. His afternoons were for Ruby. She grew fast. By the end of the first month, she was the size of a large dog. By the end of the second month, she reached Owen's waist when she stood on all fours. Her wings spread wider each week. The twisted wing had healed completely, matching the other one perfectly. Owen built her a large pen in the back section of the clinic, but she rarely used it. She preferred to stay near him while he worked. The colonists slowly warmed to her presence. Ruby had a calm temperament and seemed genuinely curious about everyone she met. The children were the first to approach her. A small girl named Sophie, maybe 7 years old, started visiting the clinic daily. She would sit near Ruby and tell her stories about the colony, while Ruby listened with patient attention. She understands more than people think, Sophie told Owen one day. I can tell by how she looks at me. She knows what I am saying. Owen believed it. Ruby had learned over 50 words now, though she rarely spoke them aloud. She preferred to communicate through sounds and body language. But every night, when Owen closed up the clinic and they settled into their living quarters, she would curl around his chair and say, "Owen's safe," in her rough, stilted voice. Those 2 words had become their nightly ritual. Then came the day that changed everything. Owen was treating a farmer's sick livestock when someone ran into the clinic shouting, "Collapse at mine 7. For men trapped. They need medical at the site now." Owen grabbed his emergency kit and ran. Half the colony was already gathered at the mine entrance when he arrived. Dorothy stood near the opening, her face pale, talking rapidly into a comm unit. The mine entrance was blocked by fallen rocks, and smoke drifted out from gaps in the debris. "Gas leak," Dorothy said when Owen reached her. "The support beams failed, and something punctured a gas line. We have equipment coming, but it will take 30 minutes to get here and set up." Those men do not have 30 minutes. Owen looked at the mine entrance. The gaps in the rocks were too small for a person, but large enough for air to escape. "How deep are they?" "About 40 meters down the main shaft. The passage is unstable. We send anyone else in there, and we will have more casualties." Owen made a decision he probably should not have made. He activated his comm unit, connecting to the device he had attached to Ruby's collar months ago. "Ruby, I need you at mine 7. Emergency." Dorothy stared at him. "What are you doing?" Ruby is small enough to fit through narrow spaces, and her scales protect her from heat. If anyone can reach those men, she can. You're going to send a dragon into an unstable mine shaft filled with toxic gas. Do you have a better idea? Dorothy opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. Ruby arrived within minutes, running faster than Owen had ever seen her move. She skidded to a stop beside him, her eyes wide and alert. Owen knelt down and placed both hands on her head, looking directly into her golden eyes. "Ruby, I need you to listen very carefully. There are people trapped inside this mine. They need help. Can you go in there and find them?" Ruby looked at the mine entrance, then back at Owen. She made a questioning sound. I know it is scary. I know you have never done anything like this before. But I believe in you. You can do this. Ruby stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned toward the mine entrance and spread her wings slightly. A gesture he had learned meant determination. She walked toward the collapsed entrance, squeezed through a gap in the rocks, and disappeared into the darkness. Owen waited, his heart pounding, listening to his comm unit for any sound. The crowd fell silent. Even Dorothy stood frozen, watching the mine entrance. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, Owen heard Ruby's voice crackle through the comm. Owen. Found. 4. Good girl. Can you guide them out? Fire. Block. Owen's blood ran cold. There's fire blocking the exit. Ruby fix. Before Owen could respond, he heard a sound from deep within the mine. A rushing, roaring sound like a blast furnace. Then Ruby's voice again, strained but steady. Fire gone. Come now. Movement at the mine entrance. Ruby emerged first, her scales blackened with soot, pulling a man by his belt with her teeth. She went back and immediately pulled out a second man, then a third, then a fourth. All of them were unconscious but breathing. Owen rushed forward with his medical kit, checking vitals, administering oxygen. All 4 men would survive. Behind him, the crowd erupted in shocked conversation. Ruby collapsed near the mine entrance, panting heavily, her sides heaving. Owen ran to her and checked her over. Minor burns on her feet, some scrapes from the rocks, but otherwise unharmed. How'd you get rid of the fire? He asked quietly. Ruby looked at him with tired eyes. Breathe. Owen felt his understanding shift. You breathe out. You use your breath to blow out the fire. Ruby nodded and closed her eyes. Owen proud. He wrapped his arms around her neck, not caring about the soot and ash covering her scales. Yes, Ruby. Owen very proud. News of the rescue spread faster than Owen expected. By the next morning, his comm unit flooded with messages from journalists across the sector. A dragon saving human miners was apparently noteworthy enough to make galactic headlines. Owen ignored most of the requests for interviews and focused on treating the rescued miners, all of whom recovered fully within days. What he could not ignore was the official message that arrived 3 days after the incident. It came from the Draconeer clan's High Council, transmitted through official channels with legal weight behind every word. Owen read it twice, his hands shaking slightly. They want Ruby back, he told Dorothy, who had come to check on him. The clan say that since Ruby has proven herself capable and valuable, she belongs with her own kind. They are citing interspecies adoption laws and claiming I violated protocols by taking her in the first place. Dorothy sat down heavily on a supply crate. Can they do that? Legally? I have no idea. The adoption was informal at best. The rehabilitation station approved her euthanasia, so technically I took an animal that was scheduled for termination. But now that she has value, the clans want to claim her as their property. That is ridiculous, Dorothy said flatly. Ruby saved 4 of my people. She did not do it because of dragon instinct or clan loyalty. She did it because you asked her to. Because she trusts you. Owen looked over at Ruby, who was sleeping in her usual spot near the clinic's main window. She had been exhausted since the rescue, sleeping most of the day and eating less than usual. He worried about her, but the medical scans showed nothing wrong. She was just tired. It does not matter what seems right, Owen said quietly. The Galactic Council is sending a representative to investigate. They will be here within the week. The representative arrived 6 days later. His name was Administrator Felm, a tall amphibious being with blue-green skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He brought recording equipment, legal documents, and an assistant who took notes on everything that was said. The hearing took place in the colony's community center, the only building large enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. The entire colony showed up, cramming into seats and standing along the walls. Dorothy gave Owen a seat at the front, and Ruby lay beside him, her head resting on his lap. Feln spoke with the kind of voice that suggested he had done this many times before. We are here to determine the legal status of the dragon called Ruby and whether Dr. Owen Hayes violated interspecies adoption laws. The Draconeer clans have filed a formal complaint and are requesting Ruby's immediate return to their custody. A holographic screen appeared, showing an elderly dragon with silver scales. His name was Elder Tavish, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. Ruby is a member of the Draconeer species. She belongs with her people, learning our ways and contributing to our clans. Dr. Hayes, while well-meaning, cannot provide the upbringing she requires. He cannot teach her to fly properly, to hunt, to understand her heritage. This adoption was illegal from the start, and now that Ruby has proven her value, she must return to us. Owen stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. Ruby was not adopted illegally. She was scheduled for euthanasia because your clans rejected her. I was told she would be killed because no one wanted a defective hatchling. I gave her a chance to live when your people had already decided she was worthless. Elder Tavish's image flickered with what might have been anger. That is a gross misrepresentation of our decision. Yes, Ruby was initially rejected due to her deformity, but that is standard practice for ensuring the strength of our bloodlines. It is not cruel. It is practical. You call killing healthy infants practical? Owen felt his voice rising. She had a twisted wing that could be fixed with basic physical therapy. I did it myself. She was not defective. She just needed someone who cared enough to help her. Felon held up a hand for silence. Dr. Hayes, I understand your perspective, but the law is clear. Humans are not approved to adopt Class 5 predator species without extensive permits and oversight. You had neither. The question before us is not whether you saved Ruby's life, but whether you had the legal right to do so. Dorothy stood up from her seat. If I may speak, Administrator Feln? Feln looked surprised but nodded. You may. I am the administrator of this colony. I have seen Dr. Hayes work with Ruby every day for nearly 6 months. I have watched that dragon grow from a frightened hatchling into a confident, intelligent being who saved 4 of my colonists without hesitation. You want to talk about what is legal? Fine. But maybe you should also talk about what is right. The Draconeer clans threw Ruby away like garbage. Dr. Hayes gave her a home, a purpose, and a future. That should count for something. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several colonists called out their support. Feln raised his hand again, asking for quiet. These are compelling arguments, Feln said carefully. However, the Draconeer clans have also made valid points. Dr. Hayes cannot provide the cultural education that Ruby would receive with her own species. He cannot teach her the history of her people, their traditions, their way of life. She will forever be isolated from her kind if she remains with him. Owen felt Ruby shift beneath his hand. She raised her head and looked at Feln with those golden eyes. Then, slowly and deliberately, she stood up. The room fell silent. Ruby had not spoken in public before. Most of the colonists had only heard her make simple sounds. Ruby walked to the center of the room, her claws clicking on the floor. She turned to face Elder Tavish's hologram, then looked back at Owen, then at Feln. When she spoke, her voice was rough and heavily accented, but clear enough for everyone to understand. Ruby not thing, not property. Ruby is Ruby. She paused, searching for words. Draconeer say Ruby broken. Say Ruby worthless. Owen say Ruby worth saving. Owen teach Ruby words. Owen teach Ruby fly. Owen teach Ruby what matters most. She walked back to Owen and pressed her head against his side. Owen is mine. I am his. Ruby choose Owen. That is law that matters. The room erupted. Colonists cheered. Elder Tavish's hologram flickered with what looked like shock. Feln stared at Ruby with his large eyes, clearly processing what had just happened. She spoke, Feln said quietly. She demonstrated clear, sentient reasoning and made a choice about her own future. That changes nothing, Elder Tavish protested. She is still a juvenile. She cannot make legal decisions. She just did, Dorothy said firmly. We all heard her. Feln was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving between Ruby, Owen, and the hologram of Elder Tavish. Finally, he spoke. This situation is unprecedented. A juvenile dragon displaying this level of linguistic ability and self-determination is extremely rare. I cannot make a ruling today. I need to consult with the full council. He looked at Owen. Dr. Hayes, you and Ruby will need to come to the council station for a formal hearing. Until then, Ruby remains in your custody. Elder Tavish's hologram vanished without another word. Feln gathered his equipment and left quickly, followed by his assistant. The colonists slowly filed out, still talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. Owen knelt down beside Ruby. You did not have to do that. Ruby made a soft, rumbling sound. Had to. Truth matters. The council might still take you away. Then we fight. Ruby looked at him steadily. Owen never quit on Ruby. Ruby never quit on Owen. Owen wrapped his arms around her neck, feeling the warmth of her scales, the steady rhythm of her breathing. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The council station orbited a neutral world far from any major civilization. Owen had never seen anything so large. The structure stretched for kilometers in every direction, a city in space housing representatives from thousands of species. Ships came and went constantly, carrying diplomats and officials to meetings that decided the fate of entire worlds. Owen felt very small as their shuttle docked. Ruby pressed against his side as they walked through the station corridors. She had grown again during their 2-week journey. She now stood as tall as a horse, and her wingspan stretched nearly 4 meters when fully extended. People stopped to stare as they passed. Some looked curious. Others looked afraid. A few looked angry. They were assigned quarters near the hearing chamber. The room was larger than Owen's entire clinic back on Theta 7, with high ceilings designed to accommodate beings of various sizes. Ruby could spread her wings fully without touching the walls. She seemed uncomfortable with so much space and stayed close to Owen's side. We will be fine, Owen told her, though he was not sure he believed it. The hearing began the next morning. The chamber was massive, with seating for hundreds of observers. The council itself sat on a raised platform, 12 beings representing the major species alliances. Owen recognized only a few of them from his studies. A crystalline entity that glowed with internal light. A being made entirely of flowing water held together by a force field. A massive insect with compound eyes that reflected everything in fragments. Elder Tavish was there in person this time, along with 3 other dragons from various clans. They sat in the section reserved for the Draconeer delegation, their scales gleaming under the chamber lights. They watched Ruby with expressions that Owen could not quite read. Feln stood at the center of the chamber. We are here to determine custody of the dragon, called Ruby, and to examine the question of cross-species adoption rights for Class 5 predator species. The Draconeer clans argue that Ruby belongs with her own kind and that Dr. Hayes violated adoption protocols. Dr. Hayes argues that he saved Ruby from euthanasia and that she should have the right to choose her own guardian. The first witness was a dragon expert from a neutral research institute. She testified about dragon development, bonding processes, and cultural requirements. According to her data, no human had ever successfully raised a dragon from infancy. The failure rate was absolute. Dragons needed specific social cues, dietary requirements, and behavioral modeling that only other dragons could provide. Dr. Hayes may have kept Ruby alive, the expert concluded, but he cannot give her what she truly needs. She will never understand her heritage, never connect with her species, never fulfill her potential. It is not his fault. It is simply biological reality. Elder Tavish spoke next. He presented evidence of the Draconeer clan's superior child-rearing methods, their educational systems, their success rates. He showed videos of young dragons learning to fly, to hunt, to master their abilities under the guidance of experienced elders. It was impressive and thoroughly documented. We do not question Dr. Hayes' dedication or his good intentions, Elder Tavish said. But intention is not enough. Ruby deserves to be raised by those who understand her nature, who can teach her to be what she is meant to be. Dr. Hayes has done his best, but his best is insufficient. Then it was Owen's turn. He stood at the speaker's platform, very aware of how many eyes were watching him. He had prepared a speech during the journey, But looking at the council members and the crowd, the words fell hollow. Instead, he spoke from the heart. I'm not going to pretend I know everything about dragons, Owen began. I do not. When I took Ruby in, I had no idea what I was doing. I made mistakes. I learned as I went. But here's what I did know. I knew that a living being was about to be killed for having a twisted wing. I knew that with basic medical care, that wing could heal. And I knew that if I did not take her, no one else would. He paused, looking at Ruby, who sat quietly in the designated area for involved parties. The experts say I cannot give Ruby what she needs. Maybe they are right. I cannot teach her to hunt like a dragon because I am not a dragon. I cannot show her dragon traditions because I do not know them. But I taught her something else. I taught her that her worth is not determined by whether she fits into someone else's definition of perfect. I taught her that being different does not make her defective. And I taught her that family is not just about biology. One of the council members, the crystalline entity, spoke. Its voice resonated like wind chimes. These are admirable values, Dr. Hayes. But the question remains whether they are sufficient for raising a Class 5 predator species. Ruby may value these lessons now, but what happens when she matures fully? When her instincts become stronger? When she realizes the gap between what she is and what you can provide? Owen had no answer for that. He sat down, feeling defeated. Dorothy was next. She testified about the mine rescue, about Ruby's integration into the colony, about her interactions with the colonists. She painted a picture of a dragon who was not just surviving, but thriving in a mixed-species environment. Then Sophie, the small girl from the colony, took the platform. She looked tiny standing there, but her voice was clear. Ruby is my friend. She listens when I talk. She helped me when I was sad about my dad dying in the mines. She did not know the right words, but she sat with me, and that was enough. Is not that what family does? Several other colonists testified. The miners Ruby had saved. The farmers whose animals she had helped Owen treat. Even a few who had been scared of her at first, but changed their minds. Each testimony added another piece to the picture of who Ruby was, not as a dragon, but as an individual. Finally, Feln called Ruby herself to speak. She walked to the center of the chamber, her claws clicking on the polished floor. Every eye in the room followed her. Ruby has learned much, she began, her voice stronger than it had been at the colony. Learned human words, learned human medicine, learned human kindness, but also learned dragon things. Learned to fly by watching videos and practicing. Learn about dragon history by reading books. Learn about dragon culture by asking questions. She paused. Ruby is dragon. Ruby is also Owen's family. Both things true. Not have to choose one. Elder Tavish stood. But you're missing so much. You do not know the songs of our people, the hunts we share, the bonds between clan members. You are isolated, alone among aliens. Ruby turned to face him directly. Draconeer clans left Ruby to die. Said Ruby was broken, worthless, burden. Owen said Ruby was worth saving. Ruby not forget. Ruby not alone. Ruby has Owen, has Dorothy, has Sophie, has Colony, has family that wanted Ruby even when broken. Her voice hardened slightly. Draconeer clans only want Ruby now because Ruby proved useful. That not family. That ownership. The chamber fell silent. Owen saw several council members exchange glances. Elder Tavish looked like he wanted to argue, but could not find the words. The crystalline entity spoke again. This is a complex situation with no clear precedent. We must deliberate. The council members stood and filed out of the chamber through a side door. Owen and Ruby waited in their quarters for 6 hours. Owen paced. Ruby lay near the window, watching ships come and go. Neither of them spoke much. There was nothing left to say. The decision was out of their hands now. When the summons finally came, they returned to the chamber. The seats were full again. The council members looked solemn. Feln stood at the center platform and began to read the decision. After careful consideration, this council has decided to create a new legal classification for situations such as this. We are establishing the category of cross-species family units, which acknowledges that family bonds can form across species lines when certain criteria are met. He looked at Owen. Dr. Hayes, You are granted legal guardianship of Ruby until she reaches full maturity at age 10. At that time, Ruby will have the right to choose whether to remain with you or return to the Draconeer clans. Owen felt his knees go weak. Ruby made a sound between a chirp and a roar. However, Felm continued, there are conditions. Ruby must have access to educational materials about dragon culture and history. She must be allowed to communicate with Draconeer representatives if she wishes. And both of you must report annually to the council on her development and well-being. Elder Tavish stood, his expression unreadable. This is an unprecedented decision that disregards thousands of years of Draconeer tradition. The crystalline entity's voice chimed through the chamber. Tradition must sometimes adapt to new realities. Ruby has demonstrated sentience and agency. We cannot, in good conscience, force her separation from a guardian she has chosen when that separation would cause harm. The decision stands. As they left the chamber, Ruby pressed close to Owen's side. We won, she said quietly. We did, Owen agreed. But Ruby, you understand what this means, right? In 10 years, you'll have to choose again. The Draconeer clans will try to convince you to join them. They will show you everything you have missed. Ruby looked up at him with those golden eyes. Ruby will see. Ruby will learn. But Ruby already knows what matters. She bumped her head against his shoulder. Home is where someone stays when you're broken. Owen stayed. Ruby remembers. 2 years passed like water flowing downhill, inevitable and constant. Ruby grew until she matched the size of the largest earth elephants, her bronze-red scales gleaming with health. Her wingspan stretched 20 meters when fully extended, casting shadows that could cover half the colony square. But despite her size, she moved through the settlement with careful precision, mindful of the smaller beings around her. The clinic had expanded to accommodate her. Owen and Dorothy worked together to convert 2 additional buildings, creating a full veterinary hospital that served not just Theta 7, but several nearby settlements. Ruby worked alongside Owen most days, her strength useful for handling large animals and her gentle nature calming nervous patients. She had become something of a local celebrity. Children no longer feared her. They climbed on her back when she lay in the sun, and she would rumble contentedly, enjoying their company. She knew all their names, all their stories, all their little problems. When young Sophie lost her pet rabbit, Ruby had spent an entire day searching the area until she found it hiding in a grain storage facility. But Owen noticed changes too. Ruby asked more questions about dragons now. She spent hours watching videos of dragon flights, studying their movements, their communication patterns. She read every text about Draconeer culture that she could access. At night, sometimes she would practice dragon songs, her voice carrying across the colony in haunting melodies that sounded nothing like human music. You were thinking about them, Owen said one evening as they sat outside the clinic, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ruby was quiet for a moment. Ruby wonders what it would be like to be with others who look like Ruby, who understand being dragon without Ruby explaining. That is natural, Owen said, though the words hurt. You have every right to be curious about your heritage. Ruby loves Owen, she said quickly. Ruby loves colony. Ruby loves home, but also wonder about other home, the one Ruby never knew. Before Owen could respond, Dorothy's voice crackled over his comm unit. Owen, we have a situation at the landing pad. You better get over here. They arrived to find a small diplomatic shuttle sitting on the pad, surrounded by curious colonists. Standing beside it was Elder Tavish, along with 2 younger dragons. The Elder's silver scales looked brighter in person than they had on the holographic displays. Dr. Hayes, Elder Tavish said formally. And Ruby, thank you for seeing us. Ruby approached slowly, her body language uncertain. She had never met another dragon in person before. The 2 younger dragons, one with blue scales and one with green, watched her with obvious curiosity. What are you doing here? Owen asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. We have come to fulfill the council's requirements, Elder Tavish said. Ruby has the right to learn about her people. We thought it better to come to her rather than demand she come to us. He gestured to the younger dragons. This is Liera, and this is Radiz. They're close to Ruby's age. We thought she might appreciate meeting peers. Ruby stared at them. Liera spoke first, her voice musical and flowing in a way that Ruby's had never quite managed. Hello, Ruby. We have heard much about you. The dragon who lives with humans and saves miners and helps heal animals. It sounds like an adventure. Hello, Ruby said carefully. Her accent suddenly seemed more pronounced next to Liera's smooth speech. It's nice to meet dragons. Real dragons. Not just videos. You are a real dragon too, Radiz said, his tone gentle. Different, yes, but real. Over the following days, Elder Tavish and the young dragons stayed in temporary quarters Dorothy arranged. Ruby spent hours with them, learning dragon customs, practicing dragon speech patterns, hearing stories about the clans and their history. Owen watched from a distance, giving her space but staying close enough if she needed him that he saw her struggle with things that came naturally to Liera and Radiz. The way they moved in perfect synchronization during flight. The way they could communicate in a combination of sounds, gestures, and subtle scale color changes that Ruby had never learned. The way they knew instinctively how to interact with each other in ways that Ruby had to consciously think about. On the fourth day, Owen found Ruby sitting alone near the eastern edge of the colony, staring out at the mountains in the distance. He sat beside her, not speaking, just being present. Ruby is not like them, she finally said. Ruby tries, but it feels wrong. Like wearing clothes that do not fit. You have lived differently, Owen said. That does not make you less of a dragon. Liera says Ruby sounds wrong when speaking dragon language. Says Ruby's accent is bad. Says Ruby flies like human, not dragon. Her voice dropped. Maybe Elder Tavish was right. Maybe Ruby needed to be with dragons from beginning. Maybe Ruby is broken in ways Owen could not fix. Owen felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. You are not broken. You are different. There is a distinction. Ruby does not belong with them, she said quietly. But Ruby also not human. Not really. Ruby is stuck between. Not dragon enough for dragons. Not human enough for humans. That is not true, Owen said firmly. You belong exactly where you choose to belong. That is what we fought for, remember? Your right to choose your own path. Ruby looked at him with those golden eyes, and he saw something in them he had not seen before. Doubt. Fear. The same fear he had seen when she was a hatchling, wondering if anyone would want her. The next day, Elder Tavish requested a meeting with both Owen and Ruby. They gathered in the colony's community center, the same room where Ruby had spoken at the first hearing 2 years ago. Ruby, Elder Tavish began, we have spent these days observing you, teaching you, getting to know you. And I must admit something. When I first saw you, when your mother's clan rejected you, I agreed with their decision. I saw a weak hatchling who would burden the clan. I was wrong. Ruby tilted her head, surprised. You are not weak, Elder Tavish continued. You are different, yes. You do not fit perfectly into our traditional ways. But you have strengths that our traditional upbringing does not teach. You bridge worlds. You understand humans in ways no clan-raised dragon ever could. You bring something new to what it means to be dragon. Ruby still speaks wrong, she said quietly. Still moves wrong. You speak differently, Liera interjected. But that does not mean wrong. When you explain human medicine to us, when you tell stories about the colony, you use words and ideas that make sense to both dragons and humans. None of us can do that. Radiz nodded. You are something the clans have never seen before. A dragon who can live in both worlds. That is not weakness. That is power. Elder Tavish looked at Owen. Dr. Hayes, I came here prepared to convince Ruby to return with us. To argue that she needs her own kind. But I have realized something. Ruby has found her own kind. They just do not all look like her. He turned back to Ruby. What we would like to propose is this. Ruby, you would serve as an ambassador between humans and dragons. You would teach each species about the other. You would help others like yourself, those who do not fit into traditional categories. And you would do this from here, from Theta 7, because this is your home. Ruby was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was steady. Ruby spent 2 years wondering what Ruby was missing. Wondering if Ruby made wrong choice. But Ruby realizes something. Ruby is not human. Ruby is not Clan Dragon. Ruby is Ruby, and that is enough. She looked at Owen. Ruby chooses Owen. Ruby chooses Colony. Ruby chooses this home. But also Ruby chooses to learn about dragons, to help build bridges, to be both things. She turned to Elder Tavish. Ruby will be ambassador. Will help others understand each other. But Ruby stays with Owen. Elder Tavish bowed his head in acceptance. That is fair. The clans will support this decision. As the diplomatic shuttle departed the next day, Ruby stood beside Owen watching it disappear into the sky. Dorothy joined them, datapad in hand as always. So, Dorothy said, an ambassador position. That will bring more attention to the colony. More visitors. More complications. Is it worth it? Owen asked. Dorothy looked at Ruby, then at Owen, then smiled. 2 years ago, a human veterinarian showed up here with a dragon hatchling that everyone said would never survive. Now that dragon is opening doors between species that have been closed for centuries. Yeah, I would say it is worth it. Sophie ran up, breathless and excited. Ruby, my mom's cow is having trouble giving birth. Can you and Dr. Owen come help? Ruby looked down at the small girl. Of course. Ruby and Owen helped. She glanced at Owen. Ready? Always, he said as they walked back toward the clinic. Ruby rumbled contentedly. Owen, yes. Thank you for not quitting on Ruby. Even when hard. Even when scary. Even when everyone said impossible. Owen reached up and placed his hand on her side, feeling the warmth of her scales, the steady rhythm of her breathing. That is what family does. We do not quit on each other. Family, Ruby repeated, and in that word was everything they had built together. Not perfect, not traditional, but real and strong. And there's, above them, the sun set on Theta 7, painting the sky in colors that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. And in the clinic that had started as a converted storage facility, a human and a dragon prepare to help bring new life into the world, just as they have been doing together since the day a veterinarian looked at an unwanted hatchling and said the 2 words that changed everything. I will take them.